I never thought the happiest day of my daughter's life would feel like the loneliest day of mine. Weddings are supposed to unite families, to celebrate love, yet I was treated as if I did not belong. When I arrived, dressed in my best suit, I felt a spark of pride. My daughter looked radiant, her smile bright enough to light the room. For a moment, I believed I would share in that joy. But soon I realized the truth. While others were ushered to decorated tables, I was guided quietly behind the stage, to a dim corner, away from the laughter and the music. They said it was just a matter of seating, that the arrangements were already full. Excuses. I knew what it meant. I was an embarrassment to them, an old man to be hidden away. Back there, the reception felt like another world. The smell of roasted meats and sweet pastries drifted toward me, mocking my hunger. Applause and music thundered from beyond the curtain, but all I saw were shadows dancing on the fabric. I sat on a simple folding chair, alone, as if my years of sacrifice had been erased. Memories weighed on me. Nights of working late to pay her school fees, winters when I went without so she could have enough. These sacrifices had shaped my life. And now, here I was, forgotten at her wedding. My chest ached with a pain deeper than hunger or fatigue. This was not just neglect, it was erasure. At one point, a server walked by with a tray of champagne. His eyes flicked toward me with a hint of pity, but he did not offer a glass. Even pity was withheld. I lowered my gaze, ashamed of the tears burning my eyes. Then, as I shifted, my hand brushed against a small table. On it lay an envelope, cream-colored, thick, unsealed. My daughter's name was written neatly across the front. It seemed out of place, as though someone had left it behind in haste. I hesitated. Perhaps it was just a card, a message from a guest. Yet something inside me whispered that this envelope carried weight. More than paper, more than ink. It felt like fate itself had placed it before me. My hand trembled as I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, as if truth itself was sealed inside. Beyond the curtain, someone made a toast, and the guests erupted in laughter, but I no longer heard them. I held the envelope tightly, staring at my daughter's name. I had been pushed into the shadows, silenced and forgotten. Yet here, in my hands, lay a secret that might pull everything into the light. And though I had not yet opened it, I knew whatever was inside would change everything. For a long moment, I simply held the envelope in my hand, staring at the neat handwriting on the front. My daughter's name, written with such elegance, such care. It felt wrong for me to touch it, as if I were trespassing into a world I no longer belonged to. The laughter outside swelled, the music rising in rhythm. Glasses clinked. Someone shouted her name with joy, the name I had whispered when she was a child, soothing her to sleep. I wondered if she even remembered those nights, the warmth of my arms, the lullabies sung in the dark. Or had she chosen to forget me, just as they had chosen to hide me here? The envelope seemed to pulse with a life of its own. My heart pounded, urging me to break the seal, to see what secrets it carried. And yet, I hesitated. I thought of my daughter's smile, her hand resting in the hand of the man she had chosen. Would opening this destroy her happiness? Or would it reveal a truth she needed to know? My fingers finally gave in to temptation. I slid the paper free. Inside was not a card of well wishes, but a document. Thick sheets, carefully folded. The first line caught my eye, and my blood turned cold. It was a contract, not a marriage license, not a simple arrangement of flowers or catering, but a contract involving money, inheritance, and obligations. I read the words again and again, trying to make sense of them. The man she had married, his family stood to gain control of property that had once belonged to mine. Property I had lost when illness and debt consumed my strength. The contract was dated weeks before the engagement had even been announced. This was no union of love. This was a transaction. My hands shook. My daughter, my little girl, was being used as a pawn in someone else's game, a merger disguised as a marriage. I felt my chest tighten with rage, grief, and guilt all at once. Had I been so blind? Had my distance from her, forced by years of struggle, left her vulnerable to such manipulation? I pressed the papers back into the envelope, my breath shallow. Outside, applause thundered as the newlyweds entered the reception hall. I could almost see her glowing face, unaware of the strings tied around her future. I wanted to run to her, to shout the truth before everyone. But then, a thought stopped me. If I revealed this now, would she believe me? Or would she see me only as a bitter old man, trying to ruin her day? The curtain rustled slightly, and I caught the faint outline of her figure passing by on the other side. My throat tightened. My daughter was smiling, radiant, alive in her moment of joy. And I, her father, stood in the shadows, holding the weapon that could shatter it all. I clutched the envelope tighter. My decision would not just change her wedding day, it would change the course of her entire life. And as the music swelled once more, I knew there was no turning back. The words on the page blurred as my eyes filled with tears. I wiped them quickly, ashamed of my weakness, but the truth remained. This was no accident. The contract was written with cold precision, its clauses spelling out the exchange of wealth, property, and influence. And in the middle of it all, my daughter's name was signed, like ink binding her to a cage she did not see. I leaned back against the wall, the weight of the years pressing down on me. My mind drifted back to the time when that land, the very property now tangled in this marriage, was mine. It had been the last gift from my father, a vineyard that stretched over rolling hills, kissed by the sun of countless summers. I used to take my little girl there. She would run between the vines, laughing, her small hands reaching for the grapes as if they were jewels. But then came the storm of illness and debt. My health broke, my work failed, and slowly the vineyard slipped from my grasp. I sold piece after piece, until there was nothing left but the memory of her laughter among the vines. Now seeing it written here, in this cold contract, twisted into a transaction, it was as if all my losses had been weaponized against me. My daughter wasn't marrying for love. She was being pulled into a bargain meant to erase me completely. I thought of her mother, my late wife. She had always believed our daughter would rise above hardship, that love would guide her life. She would never have allowed this. And yet, here I stood, powerless, while my daughter's future was being bartered like merchandise. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. The groom's family had demanded full control of the estate, with conditions that ensured my daughter's dependence on them. Hidden between the lines, I saw the truth. They didn't want her. They wanted what she carried with her name. She was a key, nothing more. A surge of anger burned through me, stronger than I had felt in years. They had pushed me behind the stage, hidden me in the shadows, thinking I was too old, too broken to matter. But hadn't I built everything with my own hands once? Hadn't I survived hunger, humiliation, and loss? The contract wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof of betrayal. Proof that the people celebrating outside, raising glasses in cheer, were laughing over a lie. I pressed the envelope to my chest, breathing hard. The temptation to storm into the hall and tear it apart in front of everyone nearly overwhelmed me. To reveal their hypocrisy, to expose the chains they were quietly fastening around my daughter's life. But then came the whisper of doubt. Would she believe me? After years of distance, after so many voices had painted me as weak, bitter, unnecessary, would she see me as her father, or as the man they told her to forget? The thought clawed at me, but one thing was certain. The truth in my hands could not stay hidden forever. And for the first time that night, I felt a shift inside me. Not the despair of a forgotten man, but the fire of a father who still had something left to fight for. I slipped the envelope back onto the small table, though my hand lingered on it for a moment longer. It felt dangerous to keep it in plain sight, yet even more dangerous to let it go. My heart hammered in my chest, but my mind grew sharper. If I had learned one thing in life, it was that truth rarely needed shouting. It only needed the right moment to be revealed. So I began to watch. From behind the curtain, I could see fragments of faces as guests moved about the hall. Their voices carried in pieces, laughter coated with wine, toasts full of hollow promises. I leaned closer, listening, measuring the tones, the pauses. Years of being overlooked had taught me a skill, They forgot I was there, which made it easier to see who they really were. The first test came when one of my cousins wandered backstage, looking for a quiet place to take a phone call. He startled when he saw me, as if catching sight of a ghost. "Oh, I didn't know you were here," he muttered, his eyes darting toward the envelope. I asked him casually, "Do you know anything about this?" The way his face tightened told me everything. He stammered, waved it off as probably just a note, and left in a hurry. His fear was louder than his words. He knew. Later, a bridesmaid passed through, adjusting her dress. I asked her how the reception was going. She smiled politely, but when I mentioned the groom's family, her eyes dropped, and her voice faltered. They're very organized," she said, too carefully. It wasn't praise, it was survival. The pattern repeated. Each time I dropped a small remark, about property, about family ties, about the vineyard long lost, I watched their faces. Some grew pale, some defensive. Only a few looked at me with genuine sorrow, as if they too were trapped in silence. It struck me then, this wasn't just about me, or even about my daughter. The groom's family had woven a web, pulling strings that reached farther than I had imagined, and those strings were made of fear. But fear is a fragile thread. Pull it tight enough, and it snaps. As the evening wore on, the master of ceremonies called for another toast. The music grew louder, the laughter brighter. But beneath it all, I sensed a trembling unease. People glanced at one another too often, their smiles stretched too thin. I touched the envelope hidden now beneath my jacket. It was my weapon, my test, my proof. They had thought me invisible, yet from the shadows I could see them more clearly than ever. And though I spoke little, my silence was a mirror. In it, their masks began to crack. The night was far from over. The real confrontation was drawing closer, inevitable, unstoppable, and I would be ready. The music swelled, the lights dimmed, and the newlyweds stepped onto the dance floor. All eyes turned toward them, every smile trained on their glowing faces. My daughter looked like a dream, her white gown catching the light as she moved gracefully in her husband's arms. For a moment, I almost let myself believe in the illusion. Almost. But the weight of the envelope beneath my jacket reminded me of the truth. Every step she took on that floor was chained to a contract. Every twirl was part of a bargain. And I knew, if I stayed silent, I would lose her not just today, but forever. As the applause thundered, I rose from my chair. My legs trembled, not from age, but from the burden of the moment. Guests noticed me for the first time that evening. Whispers spread, their eyes flicking between my worn face and the stage where I should never have been hidden. I walked slowly, deliberately, toward the center of the hall. The crowd parted with uneasy curiosity. My daughter saw me, her smile faltering. The groom stiffened, his grip on her tightening ever so slightly. "I wasn't supposed to be here," I began, my voice low but steady. The microphone on the stage carried my words farther than I intended, and suddenly, the hall grew silent. They asked me to stay in the shadows, to sit where no one could see me. Gasps rippled through the room. My daughter's eyes filled with confusion, then with shame. But before she could speak, I pulled the envelope from my jacket and held it high. "This was left behind," I said, and inside, I found the truth. The groom's father rose from his table, his face pale. "That's private business," he barked, but it was too late. The crowd's attention was hooked. My hands shook as I unfolded the papers, reading aloud the words that had burned themselves into my mind. Clauses, conditions, assets, property. The hall filled with uneasy murmurs. My daughter's face drained of color as realization dawned. She reached out, her lips trembling. "Is this true?" The groom's silence was answer enough. His eyes darted to his parents, then back to her, filled with a guilt he could not hide. The illusion shattered, the celebration soured. What was meant to be a union of love now stood naked as a transaction. My daughter's sob cut through the hall sharper than any music. She pulled away from her husband, stumbling back as if burned. Guests turned their gaze, their smiles gone, their judgment heavy in the air. I lowered the papers. My voice softened. I may have been forgotten tonight, but I could not allow you to live a lie, not like this. Tears streamed down her face. For the first time in years, she looked at me not as a burden, but as her father. And in that moment, justice was not a matter of contracts or wealth. Justice was the truth, revealed at last. The hall had fallen silent, save for the echo of my daughter's sobs. The music had stopped, the laughter had died, and the weight of truth pressed heavy upon every guest. What was meant to be a night of joy had turned into a reckoning. The groom tried to reach for her hand, but she recoiled, her eyes burning with betrayal. "Was I nothing more than a bargain?" she whispered. He said nothing. His silence was a confession far louder than words. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their heads, others whispering in shock. The groom's parents stood rigid, their carefully constructed image crumbling before the very people they had sought to impress. For all their power and wealth, they had failed to control the one thing they valued most: perception. Their greed was now exposed under the harshest light. My daughter turned to me then. Her face was streaked with tears, but her gaze was steady. In her eyes, I saw the little girl who used to run through the vineyard, the one who had once trusted me with all her heart. And for the first time in many years, that trust flickered back to life. She stepped toward me, trembling. "Why didn't you say something earlier? Why didn't you stop this before today?" I swallowed hard. "Because I thought you were happy. And I wanted that for you, more than I wanted anything for myself. But when the truth fell into my hands, I couldn't stay silent. Not when I knew it would destroy you." Her lips quivered, and she collapsed into my arms, her sobs muffled against my chest. I held her tightly, as if the years of distance could be erased in that single embrace. My heart, so heavy all evening, felt lighter than it had in decades. The groom's family tried to salvage their dignity, but the damage was done. Guests began to leave, some with scornful glances, others shaking their heads in disappointment. The grand celebration had dissolved into shame. The groom himself stood frozen, his carefully built future collapsing around him. I knew I had changed the course of my daughter's life that night. Perhaps she would carry scars, perhaps trust would be harder to give, but better scars from truth than chains of deception. Later, as the hall emptied and silence settled, my daughter walked with me into the cool night air. The stars glimmered faintly above, and for the first time in years, we walked side by side. She took my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. I looked at her, my voice steady. The world may try to silence us, hide us, or use us. But truth has a way of finding the light. And love, real love, cannot be bought or bargained. In that moment, I no longer felt hidden. I was not behind a stage, not forgotten, not erased. I was her father again. And that was enough.